Good morning, everyone. We're going to be starting in just a few moments. I'm waiting for my um, guests to make their way over here so we can get started. So as soon as Louis Garcia, Amy Carter, and Ann Ritchie make it in, we will start discussing local scalability. This is going to be a great conversation with some wonderful guests. I am just waiting for my guests to arrive. So if you all will just sit tight for a few moments, I am sure they will be here. So I am waiting patiently for my guests to arrive. While we're waiting, if you all have any questions about local scalability that you would like us to discuss, for example, what issues you all have faced during COVID in terms of growing your business or keeping your business going. If there have been issues you have faced in terms of pivoting, and that what I mean by that is taking your business and moving it, turning it some to make it more optimal to doing what you want to do. If you have questions like that, let me know. We'll talk about that as well, because there's a lot of things that have changed since COVID in terms of making one's business profitable. I know I saw an article this morning when I was reading prior to the conference where it was talking about in the fields of construction that the construction and construction related jobs are really booming right now. Oh, there's Amy. Hey, Amy.
Hi, good morning.
Okay, we've got one of three. Now we just need Ann and Louis, so hopefully they'll be with us shortly. So we'll give them a few more minutes. How are you doing today, Amy?
Fantastic. It's nice. It's a little bit cooler this week, so it's super nice. It's been a good busy week. So what about you? How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Yeah, it was kind of chilly this morning, actually.
Yeah, it was. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just with Anne, so I'm imagining she'll be here in just a second.
Oh, okay. Wonderful, wonderful. I was telling those who are just now signing on about what we're going to be discussing um, on our workshop today, and asking them if they had any questions to go ahead and to post them. Everybody so far, though, is just saying good morning and looking forward to gathering some great information.
Fantastic.
Um, so why don't we go ahead and get started while hopefully Louis and Ann will be joining us. So Amy, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and what it is that you're going to be providing us today.
Absolutely. So hi, I'm so glad to be here. My name is Amy Connor, and I am the president and owner of CMO on Loan. That's Chief Marketing Officer on Loan. We're a local firm. We serve Dayton, Cincinnati, and Northern Kentucky, and then Indiana over just on the east side there. And what we do is we help mid-market, privately held companies, much like I'm hoping many of you. And what we do is we know that a lot of you don't need a full-time marketing leader. You don't want one, but you could use the expertise. So we go, we meet with you, we then build your revenue generating marketing system, and then we help you begin to implement it depending on what you need. And then if you need more help, by all means, we're there, but otherwise you're on your way, and then we can come back and help you grow it. And one of the things in my experience, I was at the Yimes Company, which was in Dayton, and then Procter and Gamble, and then Luxottica. But we learned a lot about, as we shepherded businesses through specifically the 2008 downturn, is how do you thrive in a VUCA world? VUCA being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I would say right now is VUCA. We are in a VUCA world. And so some of the principles around marketing and knowing your customer, they're still true. And so those are the types of things I'll talk about today is how do you continue to thrive? And we'll talk about it from the brand point of view, and Anne and Louis will talk about it other points of view. So hopefully you get a combined idea of how do you thrive in a time like this.
All right, and Ann Ritchie has now joined us, and Ann is a capital provider and trusted advisor to businesses. She has experience in venture capital, corporate restructuring, and bankruptcies, and provides a unique perspective for creating capital solutions when risk is significant. And I had a chance to work with Ann yesterday in a different workshop. So, hi again, Ann.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Okay.
I just had Amy give us an opportunity to talk a little bit about herself and what she plans to kind of talk about during this workshop. So I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you plan to talk about.
Okay. So my background is, as she mentioned, I'm a banker. Spent 20 years doing restructurings, bankruptcies, liquidations. So basically helping companies that hit some sort of roadblock. The goal was obviously to get them back on track and return them to the other part of the bank, but occasionally it did end up in liquidations or bankruptcies. So I've seen a lot of what can go wrong in business, and it generally falls into a couple categories, which I hope I can talk a little bit about today. And then after the banking experience, I spent about 2 years doing a turnaround myself. And then I decided to start working with new and growing companies, spending about 4 years at Jumpstart working with venture companies. And I also teach tech and non-tech businesses finance through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program.
So I guess I want to start off with, and I hit upon this when I first jumped into this workshop, and that is a lot of things have changed since COVID-19 in terms of how people look at businesses, what they look at, how they respond. Oh, there's Lewis. Before I get to my question, hey, Lewis, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Everybody, this is Luis Garcia. He's co-founder of Media Garcia, which began in 2011 as a side hustle website development company. In 2017, it transformed into a growth agency that focuses on maturing small businesses, marketing, and sales processes so business owners can generate more traffic, leads, and customers. And Luis, your business is located where?
It's in St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul, Minnesota. So I've given each person an opportunity to tell a little bit about themselves and what they plan to focus on during this workshop. So go ahead and tell us a little more about you and what your focus is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, Valeria. So my, like you mentioned, my background's in the tech field. I've spent 11 years Target, and I left Target about 4 years ago. To transform my side hustle to a full-time business. So I lived that whole, I had this idea, I really want to go on my own someday, and then doing the side hustle thing, then going on my own, contracting to a bunch of people, and then going to being like, hey, I want to grow a team and actually start delegating and have other people take more stuff off my plate. And throughout that whole entire experience, I brought a lot of my corporate knowledge with me to say, you know what, I need to rely on relationships, I need to be agile, I need to use data, and bringing those elements into what we do for ourselves, but also for the work that we do for the small business owner communities. And so the focus that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be around, using a customer relationship management tool and using other even free tools that are out there to manage relationships, to track them, because relationships are all that there are in businesses. And particularly nowadays when we can't necessarily always be face-to-face with our customers and prospects, things are moving a lot more online. And a lot of people are looking at their marketing budgets in these times and saying, like, is it worth to keep my marketing budget, or should I half it, should I slash it? And I'm here to say keep it, because your competitors who aren't slashing their marketing budgets are going to continue to grow. And when things start to kind of kick up again, the economy gets back on its feet, they're going to be the ones that are thriving. You're going to be the ones kind of catching up, and we want to be in that situation. So I'm here to tell you to keep your marketing budget and use CRM to track your relationships.
Okay, so that gets us back to the original question I was getting ready to ask right before you came on, and that is, since COVID has hit, a lot of businesses have found themselves in a new kind of market, a new kind of way of looking at business, because businesses and the way you function in a lot of areas is changing. So what do you recommend to businesses post-COVID and as we're moving forward? How should they look at marketing themselves, positioning themselves in order to prosper and survive?
I think the first place that I look to is your relationships. Again, like, how is your community doing, in this time, the people that you are looking to, do business with or that you're selling to, and keeping your community informed about what's happening in your business. Are your business practices changing? I mean, you see a lot of people's websites now, they're like, how we're handling COVID, or like, are we doing physical distancing? Are we doing, do you need to call ahead for reservations? Like, you need to get the information out to your customers. I'm hearing a lot of businesses are changing hours and they're changing things, but they're not changing their Google information. When you search the business, it tells you what their hours are, so making sure, people are now using these online methods more than ever, and, they're on their phones. And so we want to make sure that your information is up to date, accurate, complete, particularly now in these times. And you want to show people like how you're responding to what's happening in the environment to show that, that if you haven't updated your website with any information in the last couple of years, people are going to have they're going to have an assumption about what's happening over there. They're going to say, wow, like, all these things have changed, and and they haven't mentioned anything about what's happening. So we want to make sure that things are remaining relevant, and that and that you're remaining connected with the community. So that might be starting email marketing if you haven't before. If you have like lists of people who you've regularly worked with and haven't been, it could be getting into something like that. But just remaining connected with people, I think, is going to be, again, like, it's really important right now is to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm going to build on something that Louis said earlier as well, is that don't stop being out there. Don't stop reaching out to your current clients. I'm not saying go spend a bunch of money. If you've got advertising, it doesn't make sense. If your doors are closed and you don't want to bring people in right now, that's fine. Absolutely. Keep everything up to date. The other thing, and there was a question there around recommendations beyond networking, association memberships. These are still people. I mean, marketing are still about making connections with people. And the more you care about them and focus on what their needs are, first, you're going to stay connected. And second, you're going to uncover those ideas that are really important to them, that if you don't ask the question, they're not going to know. So it could be as simple as, I'm not calling to sell you on anything. I just want to know how you're doing. I can't tell you the number of times I've just called to check on somebody, and lo and behold, it's turned into work for us because they know I've got their best interests in mind. So I would say, what's marketing right now? Well, marketing is really staying in touch with people and being willing to ask the question and say, look, I'm not selling you. I just want to know how you're doing.
That was something, excuse me, and that we talked about yesterday during the other workshop, and that was the staying in touch aspect, because you said one of the things that, or one of the other people that was in the workshop talked about, was staying in touch plays a big factor in building relationships, and those lasting relationships can really make a difference in keeping your business running, but also making those connections that can actually lead to business down the road.
I think also customers are a great source of, additionally, in addition to a source of comfort, they can be a great source of ideas. They are in a lot of ways in touch with markets you're not. If you do only marketing, then you can have a little tunnel vision. And I think when I communicate with my customers, I'm always getting ideas about ways to help them further, ways to partner, new problems they have. Because again, I think everything at this point, everything's kind of up for grabs. And I think a big part of survival is figuring out what skills you have and where you can use them if you can't continue to use them in the business or industry you're in.
There's a question, and somebody wanted me to ask you, and that is, how do you recover from bankruptcy or credit challenges?
I tell everybody, recover just like GM recovered. It's like, bankruptcy is not a bad word. It's a process to get everyone in your credit world to stand still. And so first and foremost, if you can do that without filing bankruptcy and going through the expense of it, that's the goal of bankruptcy. It doesn't let you walk away from stuff. It tells everybody they have to freeze while you figure out who you can pay and how you can pay them. And I think in this environment, good communication, you can achieve that same goal without having to file. And so I think the key to recovering is communicating, over communicating. As a banker on the other side, I can tell you the clients that communicated with me had much better outcomes than the ones who did not, because in these times when people are left to wonder and you owe them money, they think the worst. And psychologically, communicating makes your problem part of their problem. And so they start thinking about ways to help you because you're constantly telling them what's going on and what your needs are. So I don't think, it's never where you want to go. It's nothing to be scared of. But I think one goal is to try to accomplish the same thing without actually having to file bankruptcy. Another thing I'll add is, and most business owners don't like to hear this, but banks look at your personal credit and your business credit as the same until you reach a very, probably 5 million in revenue or above. And so the way you handle your personal credit often, unfortunately, is the only sign a banker has as to how you're going to handle their loans. And so I just tell people, again, just watch your personal credit, watch how you handle it. And again, if you can't pay your mortgage, call your bank. And if you can't pay your insurance, call your insurance company, because a lot of times they can work with you, especially now, because they're getting programs on their side to help them with people who aren't paying them.
This seems like an interesting time in terms of money being available for companies, especially from the federal government. We've had these PPP loans. We've had, at least here in the Cincinnati area, we've had a number of grants that have been available for companies. We've had different organizations offering funding for companies to keep them in business. Are these great ideas to use to help companies to keep growing and to scale up during this time?
I can answer that. So I was one of the lucky recipients of I believe it's lucky, right? Of a PPP loan. And if I didn't have that, I mean, like literally I would have had to be like, people are going to be temporarily laid off. Like it really was a stopgap for me to be able to use for payroll, and I kept it mostly to payroll. I know it could be used for other things, but for me, it was really a lifeline for me. And to Ann's point, I attribute getting that PPP to being in communication with my banker, like in constant communication. I was like looking for PPP. I also heard rumors that there maybe is a second round of that coming up soon. But I think being in constant communication, that they needed some additional supplemental information. I was very responsive with that. And I think that really made a difference. And it was that I also had a pre-existing relationship with my banker. It wasn't a great one. I don't have a lot of banking products, but it's like I go to the branch and I say hi, like just simple stuff like that. And it's a local bank too. That I think that made a difference too with the PPP. I know that there was a lot of at least in the initial round, a lot of the big banks weren't necessarily prepared, or they just didn't do anything with people's applications. So I think just having a relationship, coming back to relationships with your local banker makes a huge difference.
Which brings me to something that Amy said. She hit upon when she was doing her introduction, but I want to give her time to expand on this, and that's VOCA. VOCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, which I think is everything we're talking about right now. So Amy, expand upon VOCA, what it is, why it's so important at this stage of the game, what we're seeing across America right now.
Absolutely. So, VUCA actually is life. It has been life in the world since, very, very, very long time ago, well before any of us were around. And what's different about it now is that we're so hyper connected and things change really quickly. So the importance of VUCA right now is to acknowledge that it just is. It's just the way the world works, and that you have a choice, that you get to choose how you're going to respond to it. And the best, I would call them brands, companies, organizations, decide they're going to choose to understand what is actually going on. And Anne and Lewis both mentioned this as well. What are people doing? What are the different changes? For example, people are buying bikes, people are going RVing, people are doing play sets like no other time. Well, there's actually an opportunity in there. Yes, there are very sad things going on. People are not traveling, people are losing their jobs. Absolutely. But within that, it's just change in behavior. So VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is just life is changing. And what's important is you need to stay in touch with what those changes are, not all the changes, because that could drive you crazy. And then what do you do about it? How do you adapt, just as both Anne and Lewis said, and how do you build those connections with the people you serve? I come from a branding point of view, so to speak, which means everything you do is bigger than just who you are in one moment. So how do you show up? How do you help those that you serve in this VUCA world? And that's why it's important right now. It's important because you have a choice, and some of the best innovations we've ever known in all of time have come out of bad times, what we call them, because we get hyper focused on who we serve and what we want to do. Anything else, Anne or Lewis? Any builds on that? You guys are, I think, are all on the same page there.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
really appreciated what you said about just asking about how people are doing. Having lived through 2008, as most of us did, the difference here is that on top of everything shutting down suddenly, you have the added health issue. And if it's not your own, it's your employees. And so the stress of a recession or loss of sales or closing of your business is compounded by the fact that there's this medical thing out there. And so I really do echo what Amy said about just seeing how you can build those relationships and help people in other ways. I think that goes a long way, because this is different now than it was in 2008 in that way.
So how do we go about building our brand and building our business? We have this virus that's out there and health issue that's not going to go away, that's changing the way we operate. Yet we still have these businesses here that need to survive and thrive. So how do we mesh the two together?
Well, I can start, but then of course I'm sure Lewis and Ann have things to add to this. I always start, I ask 5 questions. Who do you serve? And not who just are your current clients, but who do you really serve as a company, as an organization, whatever you call yourself? And who's your ideal? Like, who do you really, when you think about you want to help someone with whatever service or product you provide, who is that? Put it on paper. Make sure everybody in your organization, even if it's 2 or outside partners, do they all know it? What are you really setting out to do? A lot of people like the Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I just keep it simple. What is it that I get up every day to do? So for CMO and Loan, our purpose is to help build our community by providing world-class marketing expertise, infusing that expertise into our organizations. That's why we get up every day. And then what are the changes? How are people changing? I'm not going to networking, right? This is a virtual, we can't be in person right now. How am I going to adapt to that? And then what is my next offering? So making sure I am staying true to who I am and who I serve is really the beginning of it. And quite honestly, it's not a lot harder than that. Yes, there are many difficult steps throughout the process, but I mean, Lewis is closer to the implementation. Somebody asked about how do you adapt to events? How do you think about What are you doing? You know, digital and technology is a great way. So maybe Louis, you have some ideas there.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue on that. So, when we look at the marketing strategy, like you mentioned, Amy, first we want to understand who you're targeting. We call that a buyer persona. There's lots of different, target market or whatever, right? But what you really want to do is you want to visualize that individual. Like you want to be so intimate that it's like you can talk about this person like they're walking in front of you. So you don't want to be like, oh, well, we work with like, I want to have, our business works with, let's just say like people who sell ice cream. Like, like that might be one buyer persona, but maybe a more in-depth buyer persona could be like, well, you know what, we work with new generation business owners who are starting their business for the first time, and they're kind of nervous about what they're getting into, right? Like you start to paint that picture about who you're actually working with and who you're targeting, and you want it to be like crystal clear. And so you want to be really clear about who you're targeting and what their problems, like what are their problems that they're dealing with, because what works right now in marketing is being helpful. That's the only thing that's going to work right now, is being helpful. You can't come in and trying to do the hard sale, because people are in too many different places, from surviving or adapting. Some people are thriving in the circumstances too, and that's great. If you happen to be in a space where your industry is thriving, good, like continue to ride that wave. But we also need to know that like there might be personas or people that you're targeting that maybe are in that survival or adapting phase, and you want to know what are the problems that they're dealing with today. So like in the example of the small event service space, like in-person events are probably a touchy thing right now. Like it's kind of a hard thing to talk about. We just had a wedding here where there was 275 people who went to a wedding, and now 75 of them have COVID. And so it's like, so like that, to me, that's a concern, right? So like, if I'm going to be working with a small event center, I'm going to want to know like, well, what are the precautions you're going to take? What are, have you done this before? Like what's going to happen if something bad happens? Like, are you going to be there to like support me or what, So I think, it's really adapting now to say, okay, who am I targeting? What are the problems that they're dealing with right now? And is my business, can it provide a solution to their problems? And why am I the best fit to do that for them? And I think getting back to what their problems are, and coming from a place where you can be helpful. And generally in our space, we can be helpful by providing content or expertise. So you really want to look at what is it that I can provide that would be useful to that person that I want to work with.
A question has come up, and it has to do with scalability. And they want to know, how do you define scalability? What are the steps and processes in that?
I actually spent some time really thinking about this. And to me, the difference between growing and scaling is really, and I'm a numbers person, so excuse my bias, is really in your expense base. So growing to me would be increasing your revenue with a commensurate increase in expenses. Scaling to me would be growing your revenue without a commensurate increase in expenses. So it's more about leveraging your existing expenses to create more revenue. So scaling, in my view, at the end should have an improved profit margin, whereas growth might have more revenue, more profit, but the margin, the percentage stays the same. And so when you talk about a scalability, I saw the question, I do think it's a mindset. It's how to generate revenues without exploding cost. And so I think that is a mindset. It's and there's a lot of different techniques about it. And if you Google it, there's a lot of different ideas. I think one thing that I've seen a lot increasingly is where you scale by having your customers do more of your work for you. So your expenses don't increase, but your revenue goes up. An example, the two examples I think of is kind of like Starbucks. So Starbucks has trained their customers to order in a certain way. And if you're that person that goes in there and like doesn't know their language, everybody starts staring at you, making you nervous. But your customers come in and say, I'm the one that comes in and is like, well, I'll take a small with how many ounces in that? What's it called? Whereas the person in front of me and behind me, they're like, I want a latte with double, triple. And it speeds their process, their ordering process. And that's why their stores are so small, because they don't want people like me coming in and gazing at the board, asking what the mixture is. And so that's one example of where you're really offloading work to your customers without them really knowing it. And it increases your revenue with no increase in expense. Another worse example is that checkout line, the self-scan checkout line. I personally don't think that's really worked that well. I think a lot of customers feel like it takes longer and it requires more effort. But that's another example where you try to increase your throughput or your revenue without increasing your expenses. A third one is, I can't remember which insurance company, but one of the insurance companies, when you have an accident, you call them on the spot, they come out and they write you a check. And so in your mind, you're thinking, wow, I got my check right after my accident. To them, they eliminate a ton of costs that occur when you leave the scene of an accident. You go home, you know, your spouse tells you, don't you have a backache? Isn't your neck twitchy? Don't you need to go to, you cut all that out. Whereas to the customer, it's like, great, I got my money. And it really increases the profit margin for those claims, because they don't have a claim office and there's not 5 phone calls back and forth about what really happened.
I think that makes sense. And there's a question in here around what are the key metrics to know when it's appropriate to scale. I think Ann's the expert on the revenue and the cost side. And again, I'll speak to marketing. That's what we focus on. Is the very first step, believe it or not, is to track it. So now more than ever, you can track what you're doing. One of the biggest frustrations we hear from people is that they don't know what to do with marketing, and they feel like they're wasting a bunch of their money in marketing, but they don't even know what that is. But then when I say, well, how's your marketing doing? They have no idea. They've never tracked, and Lewis would probably can talk to you about all the different thousands of ways you can track it. And also could probably simplify it for you too, is like, pick a couple of key things. I would say Ann could speak to the financial business side of it. I can speak to are you growing the number of customers if that's your goal? And is your average size customer what you want it to be? And is your profit per customer what you want it to be? Pick a couple of metrics, and then the leading indicators that marketing would tell you. Are you growing the number of impressions you have in the market? Are you bringing more people if it's a website based? I was in retail for some time talking about traffic. How's your traffic, even if it's a rough number to say how many people come in every day or every week? Those are ways to track it, and track it if you can weekly. Sometimes it's super hard to do that, but it's funny when you watch those trend lines over time, they're very illuminating, and they help you see where those triggers would be. And I don't know the exact triggers, it really matters based on your business, but I can tell you, as we do marketing dashboards for our clients, it is amazing how much more confident they are on going to the next step, because they can see the trend, not just one number, the 1 week's number. They get to see the trend over time, and that gives them confidence. And at what point do you scale?
Yeah, I think 2 other factors that come to mind too in the world of scalability are going to be, particularly in service-based industries, like, do you have a repeatable, reproducible product or service or offering? If you're recreating the wheel for every single customer engagement, then scalability is not possible. And so, and I've been in that trap as an agency, especially a creative agency. We can do thousands of different things for a customer in their marketing and sales space. But we've since COVID, we've focused our services down. We've niched them in a way where now we used to say, well, we'll do sessions, we'll do lead generation, do customer acquisition, like we'll do all 3 of those things. But now we're like, nope, we're just going to do sessions. Like, we're just going to grow your website traffic, and that's our value proposition. I like that direction because, one, it's a clear, better story to tell the people, and then we can actually design better services and packages around that. So I think first, having a repeatable, reproducible service is key. is a prerequisite to that scalability, because if you don't have that and you're recreating the wheel every time and you're starting to grow, things are starting to start coming loose on the engine. And the other thing too is automation. Is we can definitely use automation as a way to scale. So if there's like communications that you're always sending out to people, during different points of their, whether prospect journey or their customer journey, there are likely chances to automate that, whether it be through templates and rewriting things out ahead of time, pre-scripting things out, and even having these things be automated based off certain triggers or events that happen within your business. So I would definitely look at reproducibility and automation as a tactic.
There's a question on here about personal care businesses such as cosmetology, barbering schools, and small businesses like barbers, stylists, nail techs, these service groups. What can you suggest for those types of businesses? I know they've been hit pretty hard, and it goes back to what Ann sort of said, that those are the types of businesses where health becomes a big thing on the side, because that's the close contact kind of thing also. So are there any recommendations for these types of business when it comes to scalability and growing and continuing to function?
And Anne, it looks like there's an operating at 33%. It might be more in your realm. That this question was from Donita. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I saw the 33%. I didn't know what that was, gross or net. If it's net, that's a nice margin, but it's probably gross. I think personal care is a hard. Okay, gross. She said, yeah. It's a hard business. I think on the cosmetology and barbering schools, I think people are taking to, there's definitely a trend where people are starting to question 4-year degrees. There's a lot of offline. So I do think there will be an increased demand for more applicable education options. And so maybe the jobs aren't right there right now, but I think people are looking to enhance their skills during this time in preparation for when things come out. I don't know to what extent cosmetology and barbering school can be done online, because I know you need live. But, any part of that can be digitized or done online, even something maybe as simple as like finding where you can get those heads and wigs and seeing if you can run an online class, like quick how to do a haircut on a dummy, or I don't know what you call them. That might be an idea. Mannequin, right? A head mannequin, right? Stylist, that's tough. I think the good thing is it's a demand that probably is not going away. The hard part is it's hard to deliver at this time, and you have all the laws to keep up with. I would just say as much as you can digitize, and also if you can figure out if you can last a period of time without providing the service and hunker down, stack your cash, and then come out stronger. Again, keeping in touch with your customers, figuring out how you can help them do their own services, but also just preparing yourself. There's two strategies. There's stick it out and extend your runway, but there's also the strategy of closing and coming out strong. If you close temporarily, you still have to keep in touch with your customers, but the burn rates on restaurants and those kind of businesses are huge. And most of the restaurants that are open are not profitable. They just have more cash to last longer, which is unfortunate. I think also I talked a little bit about yesterday, if there's any cost that you can change from fixed to variable, that can go a long way. If you can talk your landlord into saying, hey, if I get 5 customers a day, I'll pay you X%. Under 5, I need to just keep that to keep alive. Again, it's that relationship. That landlord does not have 50 people waiting to rent space. And so it's just kind of balancing everybody's tragedy or losses and making sure, I always say, make sure you take care of the people that have more struggle than you and lean on the people that have less. So If your mortgage is with a large bank, lean on the bank. If your employees are really suffering, you got to lean in and help them out as well.
And it's interesting, Danita, since you're listening here, my sister and I had this very conversation yesterday pertaining to our mom, about returning her to a salon. She's older, and we've been doing her hair, and I am so ready for her to return to the salon. I am so ready for her to return to the salon. But we were having that conversation and trying to decide, is this the time? And trying to determine the salon she goes to, if they're following the correct protocol of spacing out the people who come in and spacing the people who do this and do that. And we're not sure because we haven't been there since COVID when everything closed down. And that's a concern we have. And so I think that goes back to what Amy and Lewis were talking about in terms of staying in touch with your clients, and the message that's delivered and different things like that, because that plays a part in trying to determine what you do and how people respond, and their feeling of feeling comfortable in those types of settings. That just came to my mind when they were talking about that.
Because some of your questions around mobile services, I read just now the medical grade guidelines and practices, so you've got that. Has a lot to do with who your customer base is. If they are an older group or potentially a group that does have trouble, there's a chance they're not going to be interested. If they're younger and or healthy, or like my dad who's going to be 80 and thinks he's 50 and has no troubles and he's a healthy guy, he'd be there. He'd be the first guy there. So it really depends a lot on who you serve, as we said before. And I bet that if you called up a couple of your people, they would tell you what they want, because everybody's across the board. I think somebody else mentioned that. There are emotions across the board on this. People are dealing with it in a lot of different ways. So knowing a pretty good sense for who your group is, what I did. Even if we have meetings, a lot of my clients are like, we don't really have anybody in the building. Okay, gotcha. We won't do that. And some others are like, no, we're fine. Just wear your mask and be safe. So it's a very interesting dance right now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I also, I had one hair salon client that just switched her hours. And so she tried to capitalize on the fact that we're all sitting in front of a computer all day, but we still need to look a certain way. And so she opens from like 5 to midnight, which I know is unconventional, but it's kind of filling a need that was probably always there, but is accentuated now, and it's a way to differentiate yourself. And she's pretty busy. Again, she still has the spacing, but especially women need that flexibility that they didn't have before this. So that's something you can add, and hopefully retain or maybe even gain clients.
That's a cool story.
That is. There's another question about key metrics to know when it is appropriate to scale. How do you know when it is?
I think it has a lot to do with what scales, keep things in line. What's your, as Ann was suggesting, making sure you're not growing expenses too far ahead of revenue. So I would say that definitely is it. And I think that's less around, is it any one point in time? To me, somebody else talked about capacity and is it scalable? I mean, honestly, if you are to the point where you need to hire another person, are you ready? Do you think you'll get the sales in time? And so to me, it's not one decision, it's lots of decisions, but it's tracked over time with that trend idea again. And what I really like about what Ann and Lewis are saying is bringing together different people. And I think that's part of this community, is there are a lot of people with great insights, but you could get ping-ponged all over the place. Pulling together a few people that you really trust to get an Ann I'd love an Ann in my corner. I'm loving Lewis in my corner to say, hey, what are the couple of things that matter to you from this point of view or from this point of view? And invite people like that you trust into it with you. And then I guarantee you'll have a good path and people you can trust and rely on as well as you go. I know that's kind of a non-answer, but that's some of the ways I think about it.
Can you all give examples of how you've scaled your businesses?
Lewis is
Everybody's silent.
Is Lewis on mute?
Sorry, yeah, thank you. So
Okay.
my how that worked for me is I used to be the primary salesperson in my business, and I assert that most small business owners are operating that way, where the business owner is the primary salesperson. And my business started, I stepped out of being the primary salesperson and made a process, delegated to someone else and hired them and had them run it. And then even, we did some training and stuff and made sure that they were doing it, the way that works for the business. And that has not only grown my revenue, but it's also freed up my time, which I think is a way to look at scaling is like, am I growing my business and decreasing the amount of time that me as a business owner is spending within my business? And so I've been able to achieve that through getting out of being the primary salesperson. And so I kind of look to that as one place as an example of how I've been able to scale.
Well, that's
I would hit up what Lewis
ahead,
said.
Amy.
For me, it's just leveraging myself. And so figuring out what tasks or responsibilities I really don't need to do and finding someone to do them that maybe is not as time strapped or resource strapped and maybe at a lower wage rate so that I can do the things that only I can do. And a lot of that is that soul searching and figuring out, do I need to do it all? Can I do it all? I think a big part of scaling is having the infrastructure. You don't have it the day that you decide to start scaling, but you have to build it along with your scaling or you'll end up crazy, working crazy.
What small business owner isn't a little crazy, right?
Right.
So mine also happened over time. It was just me in 2016. And then I realized I couldn't go on vacation. I couldn't even take a day off because no one could keep up with it. It's a total service business. So I had some friends and I said, will you work with me? And she said yes, absolutely. So I could go on vacation. So that was a big start. But then I realized, and what I've been working on a lot is in order for us to deliver our brand every day, because now we have 6 part-time consultants that work with me. I'm the salesperson. I'm the person that does a lot of the work still, and I enjoy all of it. So in the business, on the business, with the team. So we work on what we call the CMO and loan way. And my team's the one who told me, Amy, just tell us how you do it. It's fine. We'll do it. They're all wicked smart people. So that's not the issue at all. It's just I've never told them. It was all in my head. So I would say something that could help you scale, especially if you're service-based. And Ann just said this, you have to let go of some things. And they may be things that you really like, not everything, because then you'll maybe be miserable. But let go of some of those things that other people could do as well or probably better than you, and let go of some of that control. And I think, Ann, you said it's the emotional piece that's even harder than the tactical piece. And that is an everyday question in my mind of like, what can someone do better? Because then going back to the brand and the mission of who I serve, because then I can serve better and then we can be better together. And it's hard to keep all of those 3 together, but for service-based businesses, absolutely. It's about delegating and making sure that they've got the skills to do it. And I'm sure another product-based, again, when I was at IMES or even at P&G running businesses, it had a lot to do with what's the capacity of this equipment? At what point are we just going to run out of it? But let's make sure, look at those trends. It's not just a short-term blip. And can we muscle through that? And then is it going to go back down? And so that combination comes in as well.
Hey, Amy, can you share with people the abbreviated kind of aha moment for you when you decided to go into business for yourself?
Sure. It's a moment of not knowing myself at all, quite frankly. I left Luxottica. I was the VP of marketing for LensCrafters, so a $2 billion business. I'd been in corporate America my whole career, and I had a chance to stay or go. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to retire from Luxottica, so I think I'll leave. And someone literally asked me right after that, well, you think you want to own your own business? I mean, you've kind of got, this marketing thing, you could help people. I'm like, no way will I own a business. Hopefully many of you on the line here are better know yourself. But it was through literally meeting people like probably many of you on the video call today, or the video today, where I learned about your heart, your passion, your dedication to your community. And I heard 100 times over, man, I could use your firepower. I just don't think I need it every day. And that aha, that probably obvious to many of you, truth that, wow, you could use some marketing expertise, but you need it in the way you need it, not some cookie cutter way. And you don't need it every day. So from that, it took me 9 months to figure that out. And I thought I was going to get another VP of marketing job. And when I realized I really, really wanted to be a part of helping build our community. So that's where CMO and Loan came. So there you go. Is that short enough for you?
I just love it. I just love the fact that you were, in corporate America for years and were doing all these things, but it took that need to step back and take another look and say, okay, I've been there, done that, but that's not what's fulfilling me. That got you into being your own entrepreneur.
So true. And I think a lot of us go through it. Some are set out, Louis, you were at Target, so you were at another big place and you saw the power and amazingness of working at big companies, but now you probably see how great it is to have a different kind of impact.
Yeah, absolutely. That I really heard a lot of myself in your sharing, Amy, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get all that corporate kind of tactics and training, and but the small business community needs something so different. I mean, they need it, but they don't need it at the level of the corporate,
Right.
Business needs it. They need it applicable to them. And so I think your heart and mine are aligned that we're out to cause a world where, not half of businesses fail after 3 years.
Right.
That's like a depressing metric for me. And I'm out to change that, because being a small business owner shouldn't be like a good luck kind of thing. It shouldn't be a coin flip kind of thing. Like, we need small business owners, and they need a scale too, right? So I'm really happy that, again, that this session is here, because this is the stuff that we need. We need more of this.
I agree.
So what are you all's thoughts on inflection points and the importance it has on the sustainability for small businesses? I'm not sure I know what inflection points are, so can somebody explain that to me?
I was reading the same question. I was like, what does that mean? One thing that, and this might be an inflection point, it might not be, I think businesses are not straightforward anymore. They're not linear. I can't name many companies that are strictly a product company or strictly a service company. And so especially with the rise in e-commerce, the good news is that you have multiple streams of income and sources of income and different types of customers. The bad news is that you lump it all together when you do your reporting. And so one exercise that I always start with is break down your revenue and gross margin into categories based on the different products. And it can be, you don't have to do it by SKU if you're a product company, but if you offer a product and a service, you need to be preparing separate analysis for those gross margins, because when you start to scale, you got to know which one is more profitable. And it doesn't mean that you ignore the other one. Maybe you try to get the other one up to the other profit level. But if you have limited human and capital resources, you want to make sure you're putting it into the right line of business. And it's never that simple, because the businesses feed each other and it's very hard to separate your costs. But even if you just do a back of the envelope estimate to see where your profitability comes from, I guarantee it doesn't come from where you think it comes from. And it probably doesn't come from the most exciting part of your business. I've walked through the process with a lot of entrepreneurs, and For some reason, the stuff that's the most fun for them usually is not the most profitable, which is fine because you're the owner and you can figure out what you want to do, but you definitely want to know. And if you sell the same product, you only have one product, but you have 3 or 4 different customer types, you want to break it down by customer type, because especially if you're in a service business, there are certain types of customers, and we all know them, that require way more in terms of callbacks, hand-holding, returns, questions. And again, it doesn't mean that you dump those customers. It might mean that you take fewer of them or price them differently, or you might do the same thing and you just know in your mind that they don't contribute as much to your profitability. I don't know if that's an inflection point, but it could be if you split it out and realize that one business you're losing a lot of money on and it doesn't contribute to the other. The inflection would be, maybe I need to get out of that.
An example that he gave was if Walmart opened up next door to a mom and pop shop, how would they adjust? Or do you wait for Walmart and make the adjustment anyway?
Well, I have some experience. When I worked at the Imes company, we were acquired by Procter & Gamble in 1999. And if anybody remembers the 90s, that was when there were a bunch of mom and pop pet stores. And then PetSmart and Petco started coming on, the bigger ones started coming on. And then in 1999, when we were acquired by Procter & Gamble, in order to scale, so to speak, our pet food, we had to go to national distribution immediately because of the way all the contracts with P&G worked. So we went from just being in mom and pop and in pet specialty to every Kroger, every Walmart, every mass that you could think of within a period of a couple of months. So this immediate situation happened, and it happened very quickly because of the sale and all of that. So what we saw come out of that was that some didn't adapt, some stayed there and tried to sell what they did. But then the others, the ones that you see now, they went to products that Walmart wouldn't pick up because they were too small. They went to the natural products. They went to the specialty items. You saw, they already had like veterinary and grooming before then, but you really saw them come forward with more of those. So the way they differentiated is they thought about who is their core customer and how do you bring them in? And it's not necessarily competing with Walmart. Because if you're trying, and yes, you can't, they carry the Imes, and there were lots of battles back and forth on how do they make any money on that. And so really that was a manufacturer issue. But if you're a mom and pop, I'd say, again, who's your customer? Who do you serve? And how do you get creative with the types of products you bring? You actually have a lot more flexibility than Walmart. Selling to Walmart, I can tell you, it's a tough business. It's hard for them because they can't take something in that's too risky. And you can at a lower level. So there's another question.
Yeah, it says on the Walmart example, how do you compete with saving human resource capital when big players like FedEx have come next door? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
What business are you in where FedEx shows up next door? Wholesale industrial. Okay. I think one thing about the Walmart examples, Walmart, if you Google it, there's like there's a lot of articles on competing with or selling to Walmart because it's not a small endeavor. I think, and I saw this with the pandemic. The business owners that are doing well are the ones that in November and December and January saw this coming. If March was if when they closed was your first eye open, you probably were not taking in the information that you were reading. January, most people should have been preparing for what was coming. Now, you couldn't prepare for how long and a lot of the details, but something was going to happen, and it was clear that it was going to happen. I think with Walmart, you always need to keep those kind of things on your radar. And so it's hard because you don't have a lot of time, but you've got to constantly be having a landscape. The big things are when you have a competitor like Walmart, or if you have a change in regulation or legislation like we have now, where you can't open your restaurant to a full to fill your room. But a lot of that stuff is stuff that should be already on your radar and looking out. And again, anyone who didn't predict that there was going to be a severe dip in their sales in January probably wasn't paying attention to some of the things that were on the news and what could happen. So Walmart moving next door to a wholesale industrial, I think the specifics, it would depend a lot on the specifics, but it's really your customer. A lot of people don't like Walmart and don't want to shop in Walmart, and don't like the largeness of Walmart. You're not going to compete on price because they have that. So it's going to be some other form of competing, and really knowing who your customer is, and being willing to say, that's not my customer and I'm never going to get that customer. And maybe you get more customers because people have a frustrating experience at Walmart, and decide that you're a better option.
I wonder if we don't quite understand the question, because it talks about FedEx as an employer. Are you worried about, when you say save, do you mean cut expenses, or do you literally mean you're losing people every day?
Yeah, it looks like from the chat that you're talking about how do you hire to compete with Walmart, and that's tough. There are a lot of industries in Cleveland. I'm in Cleveland, but that are really struggling for human capital. And I would just say it's got to be being able to provide your employees or your potential employees with a better employment experience, because most people don't leave jobs because of pay. They leave because of something else. And so how do you really engage your employees? And every employee doesn't want the same thing, which makes it hard because it's hard to offer them different things, but really being sensitive to what triggers your employees. I would think in this day and time, flexibility, childcare flexibility, anything like that is going to make someone more loyal to you than they would be to a place that doesn't have it. If you can't offer benefits, time off or flex time is a benefit that is hard for a lot of larger corporations to manage.
Doesn't it also, though, come down to how you treat your employees? Isn't that a big part of the competition also? I read that in a class I'm taking now, is that it's not always the pay, it's sometimes more so the treatment and how you feel a part of that company.
Yeah, I have several clients, and they're all in this region, and they are mid-market, so they're small, they're privately held. A lot of them have like drivers, maintenance people work in mines. And the number one thing they focus on is, how are my employees right now? What is the big word is culture, but do people feel valued? What's my turnover? Am I asking enough questions to find out what's important to them? And I'm also on a board of a company that does janitorial service. So for them, I mean, that's a tricky business. You're dealing with weird hours, part-time work, you name it. And so they focus a lot on how are the
I'll get to it. So. It's not good.
How are all of my employees doing? And they track it on a weekly basis, their turnover, but really it's the heart of what they're doing and how their employees are cared for, because what they focus on is getting referrals from those employees to go find more people, because you want to build from within. Not easy. I'll tell you, the number one issue most of my clients have isn't market their business to customers, but market their company to employees. So it's a challenge, especially with big ones. That also hurt though, because we have Amazon coming in here. Amazon is churn and burn, and a lot of people, they could get $1 or $2 more. But if you have a welcome back policy, a lot of times they go for the little bit of extra money and they're so unhappy, they're looking for a safe place to return. So that's another, not the most favorite way, but a way they dealt with it.
Yeah, I hear focus in two different ways, right? We were talking about, like in Amy, the example that he had earlier about the pet store. Like it's about, okay, Walmart's moving in, so how am I going to differentiate myself from Walmart and focus on the types of business, the products and services that my niche customers want? Because Walmart's not going to go niche, so if you can differentiate yourself there, That's great. But that's the same type of differentiation that you want to have with your employees. Like you want to treat the same way. Like, well, focus on what is the right employee for your company, and then going back to the company culture. Are they going to be a good fit? Especially in these times, like people are like really willing to have kind of like not untraditional work arrangements. Like they want to work like 20 hours a week. Or like there's a lot of like people are valuing flexibility and freedom and autonomy at a way higher scale than I think ever. And I think that's something that a lot of large businesses that won't necessarily be able to meet. And that was actually a big factor, reason why I ended up leaving in my corporate experience, because I didn't have the autonomy to choose what I could work on, when I could work, where I could work. And I valued those things so much that it made me want to go do my own thing and create that for myself and also create that for other people. So I think going back to, okay, well, how do we focus on what is the right employee for this, and how do you market to them in a way that it is like, yeah, this company is a great fit for me and I'm going to thrive here and I'm going to enjoy the culture that's happening around me.
I had one client that had hired medical tech people, and they were really, really struggling to find employees, and they hired a concierge, an employee concierge. And so they were hiring, they had a need for nurses. And so this employee concierge total job was to call the nurse 2 hours before the shift and ask what responsibilities they could do so that they could keep their shift and maybe add a shift. And it was stuff like pick up my dry cleaning, or, make sure my son has arrived, is someone there after school, or I got to drop a meal at my mother's house, little things. And, it was very expensive, but their turnover for nurses went down like 25%, which is huge in that profession. Another idea, which is consistent with the kind of trying to switch fixed cost to operating costs. If you have someone you want to bring on that you can't offer the salary you want, this is a great time to say, I can only offer you this, but you can get X% of sales, or if it's in a non-sales position, if you reduce expenses by this much, I'm willing to give you a piece, just to try to make employees. I'm a big proponent of making employees feel like owners, and rewarding them for that kind of behavior, because at this point in time, when people are so stressed, the old data, I don't know if it's still consistent, but only 30% of people really show up for work. The other 70% are not giving their all. And so to the extent that you can attract that 30%, that's a huge competitive advantage.
Wow. There's a question on here from, I was going to say Mr. Rogers. It says M. Rogers, made me think of the show that tells you how old I am. It says, with COVID, our businesses permanently changed. Will folks continue to work from home in bigger companies after the pandemic? I read the other day, it said Netflix was telling its employees, don't get comfortable, because it was bringing all its employees, at least by the middle of next year, all of its employees would be working back in their offices across the country. Because over in Europe, they already had returned, and they were telling the people in the US, don't get comfortable. You're coming back to work in your offices. However, I did read in another article that companies had found their employees were actually more productive working from home, and they were looking at the fact that they had all these buildings, and they're looking at why renew the leases when they're getting just as much productivity out of folks who are working from home than they were when they were working in the office. So that's a great question, M. Rogers. And what do you all think?
I think, well, what I've heard is it's a mixed bag. It's some companies, they've realized, oh, this is a great excuse. Never waste a good crisis. And so they will continue to move that direction. Others, I'm hearing the collaboration and just the being together, the culture of their companies, they're very much struggling, just because that's the way they've always worked. So I'm picturing we're going to see a huge range. If anything, hopefully it's proven that we can be more flexible. if we need to be. And where most of us are probably set up for it now. But Ann, I interrupted. What were you going to say?
No, I was just commenting. I thought the same thing with Mr. Rogers, with Ann Rogers.
Oh.
I think it's one of those things like people who didn't anticipate the pandemic or what the effects were going to be. Everybody is going to be more inclined to have their employees stay home. The office buildings were more productive. The office buildings are going to be more vacant. But there are signals out there that that's not going to last. There's serious mental health issues out there that are related to working at home. There's also physical health issues. Most people have made their contribution to the weight gain of the COVID-19. And so, yeah, I think in the short term, everybody's going to be like, hey, this is working. Why send people into the office? There'll be some companies that say, yeah, we need people to get together like Netflix, but the majority are going to say stay at home until it starts to affect the health and the productivity and the well-being of the employees, which is going to happen. It might not happen in the next 2 months, but 5, 6, 7, 12 months of this, there's going to be a shift back because people are not, because of the trends that we're seeing now in mental and physical health and the ability to manage children at home. And so it's I don't think it's rocket science that it's going to go everybody at home for a long period, and then it's going to go back to something in between.
Yeah, I think it's going to be case by case for each business. Valeria, like you said with Netflix, I actually had an opportunity to interview with Netflix about 10 years ago. And when I was doing that, I was researching the company, and I realized how, I'll call them very libertarian esque they are, and they're very high performance company. Like, you need to be a top performer, and if you prove that you're not, you're going to be out the door. Like, no questions asked. They'll give you a severance package. It's going to be great, but you're not going to stick around in that company culture very long. And so it's not surprising to me to hear that they're going to, they're letting people know you're going to be coming back, right? Because they probably, I assure that they're looking at that as like, that's what got them to be what the company they are today. That's what works for them. They probably built out their culture and their model around that. And it's really, they probably have a sense of loss of control when people are working remotely, and it's difficult to see their productivity and what they're producing, even though I think that's such a farce. But that's what I assert is happening in that space. And so I think employees are going to start looking and say, well, do I really want, does that fit what I want? If I'm a high top performer and I want to be with Netflix, cool, then I'm signing up for those challenges. But chances are, now that this whole new world has, now that we've, proven to people that we can do this remote work, and I think there's going to be, especially for millennials and the younger generations, that are going to be like super picky about who they're going to be working with. They're going to be looking at these factors as a huge part of like who they're going to be choosing to be employed by.
Because you can still, I guess my question is building on that, is that you can still build your company and grow your company under this new concept of some type of working from home. Is my thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Media Garcia is a completely, we actually went remote about 2 years ago. So we had an office, and kind of like Ann, I think you were saying, like, I was looking at my expenses, and I was like, geez, this like office is really expensive. Not only that, I was, because I had an office as a business owner, I was always going to the office because I had to like get my values worth, because that's how I am. But that really rubbed against why I left the corporate environment, because I wanted to work anywhere. I wanted to work anytime. And now here I am in my own office that I'm paying for a lot of money and being like, geez, this doesn't make much sense. So we chose not to do the office, and we've been completely remote. Now we do some co-working, we had to, we do some in-person meetings, but it definitely does change the ability to, what I'll say, like kind of create that culture, because I think that in-person kind of connection is still really critical. It's definitely more challenging to build that type of relationship, because trust really only develops in person. It's difficult to develop trust through these video computer screens. Trust develops in person at the fastest. So I think there's still going to be, reasons and opportunities that we want to step into that are going to be in person, even if we are completely remote or working from home type business.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, it is now. Like I never had an office for that exact reason. I wanted to be in my clients' offices, and that many of us who are more extroverted are really wanting to get out more. I was the keynote speaker at a chamber event, and there were 100 people, and I knew the pressure was low because they just wanted to be there. They weren't really concerned about exactly what I would say, but it was amazing to see all these people just happy to be out. But that doesn't mean they have to go work in an office every day. So there are ways that we can be together, and I'm seeing lots of points that coming through about building trust and building connection. We're going to have to adapt. That's what we talked about VUCA from the very beginning. And what are your inflection points? And Anne mentioned it. Are you paying attention to the world around you, people around you? Are you, I'll say quote unquote tracking? You don't have to have some huge spreadsheet. I love myself a good spreadsheet, but you could track it however you want. Are you watching over time what's going on? And what are the 2 to 3 key things that are important to you? And quite honestly, like Lewis said, if working in person isn't one of the things that's going to make or break your business, why put so much energy into it? We're small business owners. We're tired. We got a lot of things we're thinking about. What are some things that are going to get you engaged employees who will want to work even more for you, even when they're tired? And how do you focus on things that are super important, like your inflection points, like those 2 to 3 things that are super important that you need to keep your mind on?
I also wonder about the, the war between the people who can work at home and can't work at home. I think that we haven't really settled that yet, but I think that's going to build because it's there's gender and racial disparities in who can work at home and who has to go in. And I think some of that stuff just takes time to figure out. When I look at the people that are out and have to work away from home, they're predominantly women or minorities. And I think ultimately that's going to be a shakeout too.
Yeah, and there is a tension. Many of my clients, as I mentioned, they have factories, they have warehouses, and those people have to come. They really need those people to come. And so a lot of times they're less likely to do work from home because it doesn't seem fair. And now, is that right? I don't know. I mean, again, it's going to have to shake out, but yeah, that's definitely a piece of it.
Well, that's true. I mean, there are certain companies you can't quote unquote work from home. Factories, warehouses, places like that. I mean, you have to be there in order for that company to function. I think about Amazon. Amazon has all those big warehouses. They wouldn't be able to ship all the stuff they ship if they didn't have people working in those warehouses to load up those vans to deliver all the great stuff, like the package I got yesterday. So, there's some, I understand what you're saying there. It's a good point. It's a good point. Jaleel says, prior to the pandemic, the companies that did remote work best used a model that engaged employees at events that brought them together from time to time by using some of the savings from the remote structure. And then there's somebody that said Amazon is going to implement robotics. I don't think robotics will ever replace human capital, though. I mean, you're still going to need people to run the robots, but I don't think I just don't see in the future where robotics will ever replace everything that we as humans do. Personal opinion. So I'm wondering, with the little time we have left, for those who are on here, what is it that you all do that are watching, and what is it that you're looking at in terms of scalability? What is it that we haven't asked that you're interested in, or what is it that you all do that are on here this afternoon, and that we can or have a business case problem that you would like to share for the panel to answer? And they quit typing.
We've been so thorough.
One point on, and I talked a little bit about this yesterday. about the term lifestyle business and scalability. And, I think lifestyle is a word that is used, and I experienced this when I was looking at venture transactions. And a lot of times venture capitalists will say, that's a lifestyle business, it'll never scale, it's not venture fundable. And I think lifestyle is a mindset. And so I think there are very few businesses or industries that by definition are lifestyle businesses. What some people consider lifestyle businesses scale nationally and internationally. And I've seen scalable businesses remain lifestyle business because the owner doesn't want anything more than a good paycheck and perhaps a good retirement for their employees. And so I urge business owners to not accept that moniker of a lifestyle business, because most businesses now, especially with more digitization and remote work and e-commerce, most businesses can be scaled beyond yourself. And I think the important thing is to understand entrepreneurial management versus professional management. And that's about not doing everything and leveraging what you can only do, and the rest kind of building a team and a system so that when you are out or need to be replaced, somebody can step in because the systems are already in place.
There's a question here that says, my issue has to do with pivoting from kids event services to selling celebration yard signs and personalized party box decorations.
It sounds like you are pivoting. It sounds like, and this goes to the question right above that, how to design your business from the beginning to best position to scale. I'll use a corporate example, but it holds true in smaller businesses as well. When I was at Procter & Gamble, I was the brand manager, which is the leader, for a really small product called Align. It's now in every retail you could imagine. But at that time, we sold literally out of somebody's garage and a makeshift website. And the thing we did from the very beginning was identified how big is the potential target audience that would actually buy it. How often would they buy it, or how often would they come in, or how many events would they have? So you get a sense for, at P&G, you call it the size of the prize, but what's your biggest attainable market? And keeping that really clear from the beginning, and then taking a little chunk of it and saying, okay, well, now I've got my proposition. Are they interested? Will they buy it? And then, of course, at what price and all of that. And we did it was literally day by day, like how many did we sell each day? How many people? People were the really big piece for us, because that's how we could measure how big is the size of prize. Sometimes if you change your pricing a lot, it masks how many people you're actually selling to, and it masks your results. So that's why we always cared about the people as well as the revenue, because we were changing price. So when I look at how do you design your business from the beginning to best position to scale, thinking about that, again, just like what is it you're really offering these people, continue to ask them, and then counting the people as you go and figuring out, is it big enough? We knew for CMO and loan that it's a big enough market here. There are thousands of mid-market privately held businesses in this region that do not have a marketing leader. Now they're hard to find, but they're there. If I picked a really, really niche, and when Lewis is talking about niches, it's not such a small niche that you can't go get enough of them to make it. I bet Lewis has a target that is, or buyer persona that is big enough that he has lots of rooms to grow. At P&G, we always talked about it needs to be twice what you think your size will be, because that means there are going to be more competitors who will come in. So where are you now? Double that at least, and that should be the size of your prize. But I'd open up to Lewis and Ann if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I say the riches are in the niches. So I think that's definitely yeah, they really are, because you get to focus and you get to really get intimate into what are the problems and solutions that you can provide for that particular situation. And so for Mr. Rogers, M. Rogers here, look to be like, well, what kind of parties like any kind of party, or is it is it a graduation party? Do you want to be the expert in graduations? Do you want to be the expert in like weddings? Do you want to I would look to like really niche down, because once you start to niche, then you'll start to see what kind of questions people are going to be wanting, what kind of problems they're having, and start to expose what those things are. If you stay broad and general, then people are just going to see you as a generalist, and then they're not going to really see for themselves why you're going to be the best person to solve their problem. And so the more that you niche down and make your products and services applicable to the very specific people that you want, and maybe you have multiple, but you can have 2 or 3. But once you have if you focus on 10 different places, it's gonna be really hard, one, to message your product, message your service. It's gonna be really hard, like Ann was mentioning earlier, to segment out all the sales based on different types of parties or different types of personas. And so start simple. I think really, how do you start from the beginning to best position to scale? Going back to that question from Jaleel, start simple, focus, and then test products, test things, see how they go. And then if you like how the outcomes were, then continue to add more fuel to the fire.
So how does your brand adapt? How do you do that? Are there certain steps you need to take?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've seen a lot of adapting. The number one is what are the changes in your consumer behavior? That's number one. And then you say, well, okay, I get to choose now. For example, they're not coming in. We had a local a brewery. Lots of breweries are doing this, and they had a lot of beer that they needed to get out the door so it wouldn't spoil. So they said, well, we're going to do pickup, and we're going to do pickup of not just bottles, but we're going to do pickup of, I can't remember the name of the big containers.
The crawlers.
Yes, crawlers. So they changed the pickup business, and because they had already, and this is where Lewis and Keeping Contact, they already had real simple, I think they were using Constant Contact or something, real simple automation. They could immediately get a note out, or on Facebook, or pick your social media, whatever, to all of their potential clients and told them about it. Guess what? They sold out, and they started making a ton of money selling these crawlers that they already had paid for. So and somebody else brought their own thing. So that's how in my mind, it's what you're offering, and then how do you adapt to what people are doing. And that's your brand. Your brand is how you act over time every day, and how you show up every time. It's not just your logo. It's a lot about how you act. And so how are you acting in order to adapt to how the people you are serving are adapting?
I like adapting, figuring out your niche, adapting it to what's happening now, getting the word out, standing true to what you believe, building trust, making it happen.
It's like you were a newscaster. You knew how to summarize things, Valeria.
It's beautiful.
It's like you've got experience in this. We've talked for an hour plus, and you summarize it in 1 minute. I love it.
That former life of mine.
That's very good.
Life of mine.
Impressive.
Yeah, I like that. But yeah, I think that's what it is. And I think sometimes what happens, and this happens, I think, when you're trying to scale too, that you have a tendency sometimes to look too broad instead of just taking what you have and figuring out how to take it to the next level by doing what you do best and finding that bigger company or whatever to sell it to, rather than spreading out more into something that you don't do, than just saying, okay, I can sell the company A over here, and I've been doing that, and I want to scale up. Why don't I just take what I do and try to do it with company B? And this goes back to what Ann talked about yesterday, and that was, maybe I don't have the funding to do that, but if I can hook with somebody else and we work together, then we can get to company B and be able to do that job. And we work together, because I can't do it by myself, but I can if I have somebody else working with me. And we do that together with company B. We do good at that. Now we can go to company C. Maybe we don't have enough, but we can bring somebody else along, and maybe the 3 of us, and you can scale up that way.
I had one little note, and again, I hate to be the numbers person that's always pushing the numbers, but in terms of starting like you want to scale, systems and documentation, and start keeping your books in QuickBooks. Because it's hard to go back, and when your bank 2 years later says, hey, I want to see your financials for the last 2 years so I can finally year 3 give you a loan, you don't want to have to go back and do that. So processes, accounting processes. I even had people who, had a board of advisors when they had no revenue, but just formal processes that kind of keep you on track that you don't have to go create when you need them because they're already in place.
So true. Processes are important. I always tell people, don't reinvent the wheel. When they get certified with the city of Cincinnati and they're getting ready to do their certifications, I always tell them, keep all your stuff together, because if you want to get recertified, they're going to ask for the same thing. So keep that stuff together, because the next group's going to want the same thing and you don't want to reinvent the wheel.
That's a great point.
These processes are very important. So does anybody else? Oh, I love it, Ms. Ritchie. Give us the numbers. Oh, okay. So I want to thank everybody for joining me. Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Louis. Yeah. Thanks, Amy. And these sessions are recorded, so I'm sure they will share with everybody on how you can get information on all of this. And real fast, Ann, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, Louis, if anybody wants to find you, you're gonna put it in the chat?
I'll put it in the chat as well, yep.
Okay, and Amy?
Yep, I'll do it.
Okay, so they're all putting it in the chat. The next session is getting ready to go live now. So everybody, thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a great deal. Thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.